I think that's an important point to point out when you were talking about, some people aren't meant to be in your life anymore. And I will say this to people, when you decide to go through the process, even changing fear to safety, security, and confidence in every area of your life, when you take those steps, people who are in your life, because you're changing your vibration, you're changing your frequency, you're transforming yourself, as Tao said. And when we do that, there may be some people that don't come along for the journey. They may stay at the frequency of where you were before. And that's okay. You have to understand that they have their own journey too, just like you have yours.
Welcome to Give a Heck. I am your host, Dwight Heck, and for much of my life, lived my life in quiet desperation, wondering how I was going to pay the bills, take vacations, save for retirement, and one day wondering if I would get off the hamster wheel of life and have purpose. A life that most of society lives, which takes us to work, then home, then repeat, and pays us hopefully enough just to survive. The harsh truth that most live with more month than money and have no idea how to live life on purpose, not by accident. This ensures the mass majority are living not just financially broke, however emotionally and mentally as well due to financial pressures. In each episode, I will introduce you to thoughts, ideas, and guests that can help you to learn how you too can live life on purpose, not by accident.
Good day and welcome to Give a Heck. On today's show, I welcome Janet Elaine Schmidt. Janet is the creator of Reprogram for Success for more than a decade and has been a practical yet potent quantum consciousness accelerator and integrative holistic healing facilitator, life business coach, and inspirational speaker. Janet reprograms individuals and business teams for success by aligning emotional intelligence with mental, physical, and spiritual intelligence. Whether you are an individual or a management team, you must look honestly at your programming. From there, you can see what's not working and instill a new way to reprogram for success and redesign your life, team, and or business. I'd like to welcome you to the show, Janet. Thanks so much for agreeing to come on and share with us some of your life journey.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. I appreciate you coming on. One of the things we talked about before I hit record is the fact, and we both agree, your origin story is so important. For new listeners or people watching my show, the reason I focus on origin story is really our patterns, behaviors, everything that we are today started somewhere. And I like people talking about their earliest recollections. So if Janet remembers something from 3-4 years of age, you'd be shocked some of the origins I've heard. It all is part of who she is. And good, bad, or ugly, it helps you, the listener, connect with her better, to know, like, and trust her. And it creates a better conversation. So Janet, please do me a favor and share your origin story. Things from your earliest childhood recollections to the adulthood where you are today.
Okay. Well, I will say my earliest recollection was I was 4 years old and my grandfather basically died in front of me. He fell over, had a heart attack, and everybody was crying. And I actually saw him with angels. So I couldn't figure out why everybody was crying, because I was taught that heaven was a wonderful place, or wherever he was going was a wonderful place. And he didn't look sad from what I saw. Now, nobody else saw what I saw. And so that was a very interesting thing for me. And as time went on, I did different things. Like I would walk out into a field. I grew up out in Wyoming, and I'd walk out to the field and just hold my hands out and the horses would come. And at the time, I didn't know I was doing the laying of hands. I was just sending them love through my hands because I so enjoyed horses. I knew what I was seeing, but I didn't speak about it much because I grew up in a family that it was you just didn't talk about it. So as life went on, I always, protected the underserved too, or the kids that were being bullied. I'd be the first one in there to protect them. So this is really important for later on in my story for people to understand. So as life went on, I ended up, going to school, getting married, having 3 children. I end up getting divorced. And in the divorce, I got a sum of money, a large sum of money. And now I could really help the underserved, both, individual and nonprofit alike. At the time, I was chairman of the board of a nonprofit that helped homeless women get a better education. I was helping an inner city hospital. And on the side of all that, I was a Reiki master. So I was using my energy that way too. So I had all of this going. And before long, everyone was attached to me for my money. And I couldn't say no. It was a really hard thing for me not to say no. And then I found myself in arbitration. You see, my financial advisor, who was with a well-known institution that was actually internationally well-known, had made an investment outside the scope. And now here I am in arbitration. Now, I knew the statistics of arbitration. So the whole time I'm in there, I'm like, I'm going to lose this money. I know I'm going to lose this money. Not once did I ever think I wasn't going to win, but I just kept thinking I'm going to lose the money. So in the end, the financial advisor was disbarred, his partner fined, the company fined, but sure enough, I only got 10% of what I lost. So being in energy work, I thought, okay, the quantum physics of that. I mean, Einstein said that, put the frequency out there of the reality that you wish for, and you can't help but bring it to you. That's not philosophy, that's physics. So I could wrap my head around, I kept saying, I'm going to lose the money, right? That's the energy I put out. But I thought there has to be more to this. And so I started, looking at my background. I started looking at myself. I started looking at my parents. I started looking at the history. So now this takes us into epigenetics, because epigenetics says that the reason why we are the way we are is the imprinting from our ancestors, which is passed down to our parents, and our parents pass it to us from birth to about 7 years old. After that, it's society, anything catastrophic that happens to us that dictates our behaviors, our beliefs, our traditions, even our emotions. It can even be our actions with our hands or just the way we move. And so I started looking into that. And I was like, wow, I come from 8 generations of ministers who signed up to be economically challenged, who signed up to give their last cents to the underserved, and who really had no money to manage. And that's honorable for them. I never want to take that away from them, because that's what they signed up for, but it wasn't what I signed up for. So that began my journey to say, okay, so what do I do with this, and how do I untangle all of this? And so I studied near-linguistic programming, theta healing, DNA re-engineering, light code activation, psyche, hypnotherapy. I really got certified in probably about 12 to 14 different modalities so that I could understand my subconscious and conscious mind and why this imprint was in there and how I can move it out and reprogram myself. And that's basically how I ended up with Reprogram for Success.
Wow. There's listeners, though, you need to check, like rewind and listen to that again, though. Everything that you did, though, was always to better yourself. And even in your trying times, you were still always thinking about serving others. But in order to serve others, you were always worried, not necessarily worried, poor choice of words. You were wanting to always uplift and learn more about yourself internally so that you could be the best version of yourself. You talk about all the modalities that you've gone through. Well, each one of those modalities is helping you ground and center yourself and understand yourself even better so that you can continue to serve. And I hear people that swear by only one modality, NLP, but they don't talk about how hypnotherapy can tie together. And I do have friends similar to yourself, not saying that you're not unique, but that do certain, do different modalities. And then I have ones that swear that you only need one. I think world is in general a melting pot of knowledge, and that you can take treat the life like a buffet. So one modality has something you like, you're going to take lots out of that, and you're going to leave the stuff you don't like, and then stuff over here that you like. And it makes you a better roundabout servant towards your clients and toward, humankind. So I really appreciated actually hearing all that. I could pick out the fact that you've been a lifelong achiever. You're tenacious and you want to better yourself. It's unfortunate what happened with that financial advisor. I had read about that. Being in the financial services industry, compliance is so key, but people don't take it serious enough, like the client themselves, because they don't understand. Just because there's somebody supposedly overwatching a financial person doesn't mean that you can't get caught in the crosshairs and go through what you went through. So that's unfortunate. I like the fact, though, that many people talk about getting divorced and the pain and suffering and the anguish. I was watching you and I was listening to you, and you talked about the fact I keyed in the fact, well, you got money. Oh, wow, I can serve other people with this money. It's giving me opportunity to serve women that are, underserved. And, wow, like you're right. Our imprinting starts very young. I have read a lot about it too, and how society starts influencing us from about, like you said, 7 years of age, all the way to where we're up to today. It's a lot to digest for the listeners that aren't familiar with a lot of what Janet's talking about, but just realize that she already has impacted me as a person that wants to serve others and always is on the climb. So you're not going to be somebody, I imagine, that's ever going to stop wanting to learn throughout their life.
No, I'm always looking and listening to what others have to say, because we have a lot to learn from others who have taken maybe a little bit different path. So I'm always open to hear what other avenue someone else is going, because there's always a takeaway. There's always a takeaway from me. But I want to express to people too, part of my story is it was my inherited money consciousness. And we do have a money consciousness. And so when I go back to my story, I think they had no money to manage. So my level of what I could hold for money was really low. And when we're talking about finances, I think it's really important for people to look at that, because it's kind of like if you think $100 is a lot of money, but you manifest or you earn, through some venture, you get $1,000, you might only hang on to that 100 because you see that as the maximum, because that's imprinted in you. So you want to take a really careful look at the imprinting of your money consciousness.
No, I work on that a lot. Trust me, 20 years of coaching people on money. So listeners, appreciate what she's saying, because it is imprinted on you. If you're my father, very, very successful man, very wealthy, yet he's the type of guy in his 80s even that will go take a nail that's bent and straighten it and reuse it again. He's the type of guy that, well, constantly, he looks like he's a pauper. But that was imprinted on him because he was one of 18 children during the Depression. So, you know what I mean? Even though he has it, he doesn't have it. He's got that, what Janet just said, $100 mentality. That's the most I can do, even though I've got 1,000. So you're imprinting. I've looked forward to talking to you more about that as well. So one of the things that, we're going to go back to the origin. That for me, that's always a key trigger. And you've talked about it throughout this process of us communicating. I've been teaching for years that our origin is our start, as we have been talking about. And, we get programmed from our childhood to adulthood, whether or not it's 7 years of age for our families, and then society after the fact. It puts us on a hamster wheel of life, where we're basically just going around and around and around. Once in a while, we get off to go to work, we eat, we sleep, but we get back onto the hamster wheel of life in our mental and our emotional mindset. Even our physical is so important. That's one of the things I'm going to ask you about in a little bit here too, where our identities are tied so much together with all parts of our lives. So we get camped in our mindset and we think we can't change. So most in society do not realize there's a difference between emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual intelligence. So
Yes.
I want to tie that into our origin. Can you please explain the differences and the basics of how you go through reprogramming those who are stuck in their areas of intelligence?
Well, there is a way, a quick way that I can see where somebody's stuck, because their subconscious will never lie. Your subconscious runs 95%. So I can literally test you to see, and there's certain parts of your body that are connected. And believe it or not, behind you, on your back, on either side of your spine, there are two spots that are considered your spiritual spots. And through Psyche, which takes your left cortex and your right cortex into a whole brain state, I can test to see if you really believe that you're here and you're one with spirit, your soul. And it will tell whether you're aligned or you're not aligned. But aside from that, I can pretty much tell in talking to somebody which area is, if they get really emotional and they're moving while they're talking, it's embedded physically and emotionally in there. And usually money is always connected spiritually, because our religious background is for a lot of people connected to money, just like it was for me. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I heard that people who had money were not nice people. And that's not true. But for me, it was ingrained in me from the time I was very young, because that's what was the belief system. So there are different ways that it can be spiritual, different ways that it can be physical, emotional, and mental. Mental, I find, if it's something that you're constantly running through your head, like when I kept saying, I'm going to lose this money, I'm going to lose this money. That was like, I was on that hamster wheel that you talk about. I was just there running it. And that's when you're all stuck right there. And so I find that by using 4 different modalities, depending on who's in front of me, I'm able to release on all those levels. And then I use neuro-linguistic programming or theta healing, one of those two. And for people who have been through a lot of trauma, have a lot of anxiety, I use EMI, which is a lot like EMDR. I'll use that, clear the old belief or the old energy, the old feeling. And then I'll put in a new belief. So if it's fear, I put safety, security, and confidence in, using those modalities. But then I double clamp it down with what's called Psyche. And Psyche, for those who are unfamiliar, came about 30 years ago. Rob Williams invented it, or came about it, and it literally crosses your left cortex with your right cortex and brings you into a whole brain state, or you can say it brings your subconscious and conscious mind into agreement on your new belief. Now, he doesn't say you move out the old belief. I do that because I believe that it double clamps it down when I move out the old belief, bring in the new, and then do Psyche. But if anyone has read the book of Biology of Belief by Dr. Bruce Lipton, in the back of the book, he credits Psyche as being one of the fastest, most efficient ways to change a self-limiting belief into a self-enhancing one. He also gives credit to Psyche for the reason why he was able to finish that book and why he has great relationships today. So that's the process that I use. And so with that process, you can balance the emotional, the mental, the physical, and spiritual all together on the desire of what you wish, or the goal that you wish to achieve.
Yeah, well, it's interesting to hear you talk about that. Obviously, people listening, it's not cookie cutter. It's just, as she mentioned, as Janet said, it all depends what she is realizing or noticing, whether or not it's going to be one thing over another, or a combination of different things, modalities that she is become an expert at in order to help you. So the biggest thing that you have to understand is that everybody can get help. You just have to be the willing. It doesn't matter if it's money related, physical, mental, your emotional state, getting your subconscious or conscious to communicate with one another, or as you talked about, your left or right cortex. You have to be willing.
Yes.
It doesn't matter if you don't have that willing mindset and you're willing to understand this might be uncomfortable. I've been, piling on all this stuff, all these layers, and now I got to peel back the layers of the onion, and it might sting, but the end result is completely rewarding when you start to work on your development of your life, right? It doesn't matter whether it's your emotional, mental, physical, spiritual. It just matters that you're willing and you want to change. So, it's nice to hear that you have so many different, again, modalities that you're utilizing in order to help people get over their hurdles in their lives. And sometimes they don't even realize it. As you mentioned prior, you'll be communicating with them and you'll know within a short period of time some of their hangups, but that they don't even realize. And once you bring that to light, obviously you have to talk about it. Are they still willing, or are they going to run away? Right. So I'm here to tell you, people, always be willing. Running's never got us anywhere except stuck on that hamster wheel. And then all of a sudden life passes you by and you've missed the journey and how special and unique that it can be, and where your presence in this life is needed. And it can be very rewarding for those around you and yourself. Just be willing to, look for people like Janet that can make a difference in your life.
Oh, thank you. It is true that the first time you're starting to change is when you actually start questioning the behavior, or questioning the emotion, or questioning the repeat of the situation, or the hamster wheel of what you're talking about. And understand this, it's always a continuous process. So we may change something, you may elevate, you may remove the fear, and you have safety, security, and confidence. There might be another situation that you want to increase your safety, security, and confidence in, or, that process. The more you dig, this is what I have to say about it. The more you go down the rabbit hole, the more you're going to find. But it's beautiful, because when you do that, you're elevating your own self. And when we elevate ourselves, we're elevating everyone around us, because when we transform, it transforms the world around us. And I say this because not too long ago, I went through, I had this emotion. I was speaking to my son, and my children are all grown. And I was speaking to him, and we would have this conversation every once in a while, and I felt like it was sticking. It felt a little not so great. So I thought, okay, I didn't go into what he was doing. I went into, why do I feel this way? I didn't blame him for it. I don't blame anybody. And a matter of fact, in any situation that happens to me, I don't blame the person, or even if it's somebody's fault, I don't blame them. I say, okay, what's my part? Why do I feel this way? Because that takes you down the rabbit hole of why you feel that way. So, and you can remove that and elevate yourself. And so I went down this feeling, and I thought, why is it that I feel this way? And I just sat in that feeling, and it took me to childhood. Well, as a child, even though I was in the family, I was abandoned. I felt abandoned as a child, even though I lived in a family. I mean, it was to the point where when I was 9 years old, I told them I was adopted. I knew I was adopted because I was treated differently. And then I realized, oh, as an adult, I felt abandoned too. So that's where this feeling's coming. He's not abandoning me. He's just growing up. And so I was able to decipher that. So I would encourage people to go into your own feelings. Don't go into someone else's. Don't focus on someone else's feelings. Focus on yours and why you're feeling that way, because it will give you the answers you're looking for.
Yeah, that's self-reflection is so important, especially myself. I raised five kids. They're all adults now, 4 daughters and a son. And, they could easily push my buttons if I allowed them to, especially with my empath tendencies. I pick up on a lot of things. And just like you were saying, I have to sit back and I have to think, why is that bothering me? I just got off a call with a client, or I'm coaching somebody, or I've just left a circumstance of being at a meeting with a group or an individual, and I'm not feeling the best. And it's easy for us in a society today to point fingers, right?
Yeah.
Remember what they always
Yeah.
say, you're pointing through, you're pointing back. There's a
Yeah.
reason for that. We need to reflect and analyze. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Self-reflection and us looking at our role in all circumstances and conversations, even if it's only 10%, it's still 10%. And if it triggers you, you owe it to yourself to understand and not let it grip you, all right, and hold you back. That's why I do a lot of coaching. Won't get into it because this isn't about me, but I do a lot of coaching with people about never having a bad day. And I
Yeah.
teach them in a very short period of time that you can live a life where you never ever say again, I had a bad day. You might see you had a bad moment, and you understand different things and how to trigger yourself to understand you're having it, and then what do you do to deal with it. And just like you talk about your modalities of how you help people, I have specific things I help myself with to get out of that bad moment and continue on with the journey of the day, because every day is a blessing for me, right? And it should be that way for everybody. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, I personally have worked a lot on picking up, and you have mentioned it somewhat within our conversation, nonverbal cues, and being a student of human nature. Instead of, letting the outside world always control me, I want to understand, right, that it's not just a verbal world we live in. It's so much more than that. And I understand that you've practiced a lot of this, being aware of how people communicate with their bodies and their language. Can you tell the listeners what you have found in regards to what to recognize with others with nonverbal communication, and what does it actually suggest about a person?
Well, it will tell me, well, first of all, it tells me whether they're a visual learner, whether they're an auditory, whether they hear, or whether they're kinesthetic. And that's just by the direction their eyes go. So if they're looking up into the corners, it will tell you that they're pretty much a visual learner. If they're going to the side, it's their hearing. And if they're looking down, it's kinesthetic. Now, also, when we're looking up, if someone's looking up to the right-hand corner, that's where we look when we're making up a story, or we're trying to create some thought. We're creating. That is a creation. But if we're looking up into the left-hand corner, that's where visually remembering. And the same goes for, our auditory. If we're, going to the right-hand side, we're creating it. But if we're going to the left, we're remembering it. So these are interesting things, because if you're interviewing somebody, if you're in HR and somebody keeps looking up to the right-hand corner while they're telling you something, probably something in what they're telling you might not quite fit in. So it's really important to look at that. I also say that I use this as an example a lot in my workshops. If I say to you, hey, will you help me with this fundraiser? And you say yes, but your body and your eyes look like a deer caught in the headlights. Well, let me just say this. 7% of you said yes, and 93% said, I don't want to do this. So it's really important for people to understand when somebody's in front of them, what they really are communicating. And so when somebody comes to me, I can tell if we hit on a subject by the direction of their eyes, by the stiffness of their body, how they move, how that affects them, whether they're hurt, whether they're angry, whether they even have rage in them. You can tell even if they're trying to keep it under control. There are just different parts of their body that tells you what's happening.
Well, it's important we actually trigger on this. And I tell people, like when my kids are growing up, I'll tell them, they didn't like how somebody reacted to what they said. I said, well, before you said that, whether or not you believe you had the right to say it or, not say it, did you look at what their body language was like? I did. They had this going on, and I'll list all this stuff. To me, that would tell me, and I used to always joke with them, because I didn't want it to be too hard of a teaching, but I wanted them to learn, what happens when you poke a bear? A
Yes.
bear is going to lash out at you. So don't poke the bear. And I still say that to them today as adults. I coach people on it, because it makes it more lighthearted. When you poke the bear, and the bear was already tense, and you're going to get, and you deserve the response you got.
Right.
Not that they deserve to give it to you. You didn't deserve to necessarily have that happen, but you deserved it because you triggered it past the point where they were containing it, and they deserved to contain it because they were having that bad moment. And then you poke the bear instead of watching their nonverbal cues, like you were saying, their eyes, how they shift, whether, how there's so much communication from the body. It just blows my mind that we're not taught this in school. It would be such a better world of conversation and communication if we'd learn to respect one another and not poke the bear, right? The way I look at it. So
I agree with that. I agree wholeheartedly with that. I also would say that I've said to a lot of people, there's a way to say your feelings or your opinion and deliver it in a way that is with kindness and directness, but still with kindness. And I think people don't sometimes think about the words that they're choosing when they're feel the need to communicate something desperately.
I love that,
I
because
always say
wordsmithing is what I call it. I 100% agree.
I like that. Yeah. I think it's really, really important.
Well, it is. And, I love this conversation. We think a lot alike. It's really refreshing. But yeah, I constantly tell my kids, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. It is something so simple as that. People don't get it. That's why there's a thesaurus. You can have a word that's said a million different other ways, but it triggers differently, yet it has the same meaning.
Yes.
So
Correct.
we owe it to people to be critical thinkers, in the sense that it isn't just about listening, it's about watching their body language and then acting accordingly. So you are correct. Sometimes it can be repositioning in your mindset. I'm going to say it this way. I'm going to be super kind more. But then sometimes it doesn't matter how kind you are. People they're just looking for that, that last pin to drop, and they're just going to come unglued. So I appreciate you bringing it up that way. One thing I am going to do for myself, and again, hopefully people listening or watching, if you haven't, listen to this again and take some notes, reach out to Janet or myself, because there's so many different things you can do to make your life better. But it all starts on realizing that you have never and never will 100% arrive to understanding it all. So, I do things not even close to what level of Janet does, but I understand and appreciate a lot of what she's talking about. And I'm going to think more about it and add into my visual Rolodex when I look at people, their eye movement. I haven't taken that seriously enough. And so I really appreciate you bringing that up, because it is something, if I'm always trying to be the best version of me to serve others, I owe it to them and myself, right, to understand that I can get better, right? So I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
So Janet, I follow a very simplistic core value system where I'm most successful when I follow it, and it keeps me in alignment majority of my days. Do you believe it's possible to have success in every area of one's life? If so, what have you discovered and teach others to achieve success in all areas of their lives?
I do think you can have success in every area of your life. I think it's a choice that you have. I think some people like having drama in their life. And that's a choice too. So it depends on, if you really want success in every area of your life, you can have it, but you're going to have to look at every single area of your life and be honest of what's working and what's not working. And that goes with you too. And it's really hard when people have to be the scientists of their own self. I always say, be the scientists of yourself, go into the laboratory, but know that the possibilities are limitless, because they are limitless, and we limit ourselves. But if you can actually go into your financial part, you can go into your relationship part, and even in the relationship, you have your intimate relationships, and then you have your other relationships, and just kind of dissect everything and take that time out to do it, and do it in each area of your life. You can say, okay, this isn't working, I'm going to change this up. This isn't working, I'm going to change this up. I'm going to change this up, this up. And it's really you're transforming your own self. And I will just say this, I've done about 200 Psyche balances on my own self. And if I catch something like I did with the abandonment, I change it. I changed the belief system, I changed the thought system, and for a self-enhancing one, instead of a self-limiting one. So it's just understanding that you are your own classroom. So be a great student and start looking at every area of your life, because you can achieve it. It's just taking stock and deciding what's working.
And I can appreciate everything you said. One thing I want to key on, though, is, you can look at yourself, you can be your best teacher, but I honestly believe sometimes in life, you being one of them, because you do it, you need a coach, you need a mentor in your life to help you, because all of a sudden, like the abandonment thing you mentioned about yourself, that realization for some people, because they don't have your level of training, that can be extremely overwhelming. And my experience, when people have certain realizations, it can cause them to go the opposite way and run away from it instead of running to it to help it, like to help them get over it. And I find, like myself, I have mentors and coaches, even though I do it, there's always somebody that's got an energy level or a knowledge level that's a percentage higher than me that is going to keep me on track. So those listening or watching, if you have that realization, or you're starting to have them and you don't know how to deal with them, you don't know how to communicate, that's when you reach out to Janet. You reach out and say, this is just too much for me to bear. That's part of the baby steps of the journey of life, of changing, is having, the ability to be willing, but to admit that you're weak at this point in your life and you need somebody to help prop you up. And that'll be some of the best experiences that you'll have in your life, because everything that you've been compartmentalizing and controlling and closing behind the closet door is going to come out. And having a coach or mentor can make sure it doesn't come out all at once and be so overwhelming that you're going to run the other way. I've seen it happen time and time again in my finance practice. And believe me, Janet understands this. Dealing with people with money, it's not about the money initially. It's about all the other baggage they have. And until I get through all that baggage, no matter what I do for them, they'll go back down the same rabbit hole with their financial and emotional, intellectual lives, if we don't start dealing with things that have been, started back in the origin. It's all ties together. So I love how you shared about that. Yeah, see, my core value system is, my listeners understand, it's three things: faith, family, and work. It's always been that way. It's been that way since I was a little boy. And it took me years to get to a point where I stick within that wheelhouse of what I'm willing to. Yes, there's different things within faith, family, and work. They all have their different, circumstances or ways that I deal with things, but it is that simple. If I have my faith, my family, and work, I don't believe in complete balance, but I can have harmony between the three, and then I'm a happier Dwight. Right? I'm a better servant of others. I'm a better grandpa, a better dad, friend, son, whatever the case may be, even better podcaster, I guess. Right. So I appreciate you talking about, what you talked about. Like, look at every area of your life. Don't be afraid. But if it's overwhelming, start with one, have a coach, mentor like Janet, and you will have 100% chance better of being successful.
I do think balance and harmony are, when I talk about balance, it's harmony too. It's kind of finding the center line of the yin and the yang. But when I say that people need to start looking at things, I would say find a coach, find somebody who will assist you. But to start out with, be open to checking every area, because once you start checking every area, that's when you can have the balance. You can find the harmony in every area of your life. And that feels amazing. And then you also know if something gets out of harmony or out of balance, the process of what to do to get it back in.
Because that makes so much sense, because when you get more attuned to who you are, those little things that happen, you become your self-awareness, or like, at least for myself, my awareness of things, the more I learn, the more I understand, the more I continue to develop myself. Things that might take me a while to have that light bulb moment now happen right away. It's like, bing, oh wow. Whereas years ago, it might have been like 20 minutes later, 2 days later, 2 weeks later.
That's
And
why,
meanwhile, I'm crushing myself emotionally and mentally over the process.
right. Well, that's why I would have never known about the abandonment. Years ago, if I hadn't have studied everything I've done and worked, I wouldn't have been able to say, okay, sit in this right now and figure this out.
Yeah.
I was able to go into the emotion. I wasn't afraid. A lot of people are a little bit afraid of feeling the emotion, but trust me, once you go into the emotion and you just kind of dwell in it, it will subside, and the door will open and you'll have that aha moment.
Yeah. And I love the aha moments.
I do too.
I used to dread them at one time because I really didn't get it. But now I love the aha moments. So I'll be sitting back and going, wow. And
Yeah.
sometimes those aha moments, so they would hurt, right? Now they don't hurt. It's just like, correction time. Oh, where's my co-pilot, coach, mentor? Right, there's my co-pilot. That's why an airplane has a co-pilot. He's doing corrections of your course, right? It's not as simple as just flying from point A to point B. The co-pilot's doing corrections. Well, my co-pilot is my mentors and coaches, and I reach out to them, and sometimes they're co-pilots that are in my core value system. They're in my faith, they're in my family, and sometimes it's work, right? It's just everything focuses back to something that's simplistic. And those that want to understand what I'm talking about more in detail, you can certainly reach out to me. Many of my loyal listeners that have been listening for a long time already know, because I talk about it in different podcasts that comes up. I try to keep things not too simple, but simple enough that outside of that simplicity, I can expand and I can continue to grow, because this journey is of life. Life's not a dress rehearsal. It's in session. I owe it to myself to continually shine, right? And because if I shine, as you mentioned earlier, our energy, we attract that, right? So we attract those people and those around us. We repel too, but usually the people I'm repelling shouldn't be they're in a season of my life that I don't want anymore. I'm in a new season, and it's time to repel that season. I'm going on to the new one. I take stock of what I learned from them in that season, or what, I could have avoided. Again, it's back to realization, and I move forward. So this is an amazing conversation. I love it.
I think that's an important point to point out when you were talking about, some people aren't meant to be in your life anymore. And I will say this to people: when you decide to go through the process, even changing fear to safety, security, and confidence in every area of your life, when you take those steps, people who are in your life, because you're changing your vibration, you're changing your frequency, you're transforming yourself, as Tao said. And when we do that, there may be some people that don't come along for the journey. They may stay at the frequency of where you were before. And that's okay. You have to understand that they have their own journey too, just like you have yours. And so I think that's a really, really important point that you said, that there'll be some people who, just kind of go away. They don't get you anymore.
Yeah, and that's okay. Like
It's okay.
it's amazing. I have people. I used to do a vlog. I did it for about 2.5 years, and it would just be conversations that would be a minute or sometimes 3 minutes long. I'd do them off the cuff. They'd be live, and some of it would be about the fact of what if that person's in my family? Well, that's okay. I still have to see them. I still have to hang out with them. Well, your time is precious, right? It's in session. Your time is one of your most precious commodities. So go to that event 20 minutes, half hour at a time, spend time with them. Then, you break bread 20, 30 minutes later, smile, be kind the whole time and leave. You can literally have an emotional, mental shield to protect yourself against their toxicity if they are that type of person that's constantly poking you. But it doesn't mean that you have to worry and be anxious about it and think to myself, oh, I'm going to see this person. You can literally work with yourself, who you are, and still go associate with people that shouldn't be in your season anymore, but have to be in your season. Right. If
Right.
that makes sense.
It does make sense. It was very funny because I studied with a paranormal healer early on, and he really turned me on to, I studied the Gnostic healing order of Saint Raphael. I've studied so many different types of healing orders. And he once asked me what I wished for, and I couldn't say it. I had to keep it to myself. I couldn't say it. It couldn't come out, but he kind of knew what it was. And he said, for what you wish for, are you willing to leave your children behind? And I thought, what is he talking about? I love my kids. I'm not leaving them behind, like, and it took me, wasn't until years later when I wasn't studying with him and I was on to studying something else that I was like, oh, I had that aha moment. Oh, what he's talking about on a consciousness level. What we all are expanding towards is cosmic or Christ consciousness. I truly believe that. And so every time we evolve or we have our transformation in a higher level, on a more self-enhancing level, instead of, self-limiting, when we go more self-enhancing, we're moving more and more towards that. And so I understand what he was saying. He's like, if your consciousness level is expanding like this and they decide to stay here, you're going to be here and they're going to be here. Is that okay with you? So it's kind of what you're saying about the family members. If you're transforming or elevating your consciousness, but they're staying here, there's nothing wrong with that. That's just where they've chosen. That's where you've chosen to go, but they just may not be communicating on the same level.
Oh, 100%. And, like people get angry about it, or they'll live in that anger instead of just realizing, you know what, I'm evolving, I'm continuing to change, and they want to stay on the hamster wheel. I'm okay with that. Just like my clients, when I try to do, the lifestyle part of my coaching, where I'm helping them peel back the layer of the onions to find out their origin of how they got where they're at, because they've never dealt with somebody like me. I'm not transactional based. I want to help them heal. I want to direct them to people like yourself to continue on that journey once they realize, like, wow, this is amazing. I can change. It's okay that if they don't want to change. I have some clients that are just like, unfortunately, they just don't want to continue to evolve. So I have to appreciate that, realize that I resonated at a completely different energy, and maybe they're just not, I'm not meant to be their person. And that's okay. Don't need to be everybody's person. Right? Only be the person to those that are meant to be in your tribe, that you like. I live up by a principle called 70-30. 70% of the time, the person I'm communicating with, or I read their posts or watch their videos, I need to be excited about seeing them the next time, reading their stuff the next time, seeing their video. Right? I need to have that kind of connection and resonate in order for me to keep them in my sphere and me be part of their world. Like, it's that overlapping principle. It's okay if somebody wants to be on the wheel. I just don't spend a lot of time with that person. I just limit it so that I'm not around that, in my mindset, craziness, because I can't understand why anybody would want to be camped, even though I used to be one of those people. Now when I'm not, it's hard to appreciate and understand completely why everybody doesn't want to change. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I understand where you're coming from. And I just say everybody's at a different journey in this lifetime. So if that's your journey, I honor it, but I'm going over here. My journey is a different journey than yours, and there's no judgment. I appreciate your journey just like I appreciate mine, but my journey in this lifetime is to be in high service of others and to expand myself. At least my belief for me is to learn as much as I can so that not only do I expand myself, but I expand all those around me. So I always take what Tao said to heart, that my greatest gift I can give is my own self-transformation. Because if I do that, then I can assist all those around and I can affect all those around me. Even if they decide they're not going to go on this journey with me, I still can affect them in a positive way.
100%. And I like the way you put that, because even when we change and we elevate, we evolve, we climb, all that energy we're giving out for the people that are still, stuck on the hamster wheel of life. Now, all of a sudden, that I was thinking when you said that, well, now all of a sudden when they see me, before maybe they weren't happy, now maybe I'm the only light in their hamster wheel journey. Maybe I can become that person that they can't wait to see. And it gives them that gladness that they're looking for. Maybe one of those times that they see me, that gladness is going to trigger them to come over and say, wow, you've changed so much. What have you done? Yes. Maybe that'll be the catalyst. So yeah, you're right. We owe it to ourselves to continue to evolve, so that maybe that person will have that aha moment, or a group. Maybe you're speaking on stage and you have a group of people that have that aha moment. So, I super appreciate the person that you are and what what you're achieving already, and what I can't imagine where you're going to continue to evolve to, because your conscious level of what you're sharing with us is evolved. And I hope the listeners appreciate this as much as I've continuing still. Actually, we're not done yet, but I'm appreciating everything, your knowledge and how you tie everything together. Your ability to share your stories is very powerful.
Oh, thank you very much. I've enjoyed the conversation as well.
Thank you. So a couple last things. One of the things you talked about it in your origin is what you went through in that money mindset. And the reason I want to discuss that a little bit more is because of the fact that, again, I've been doing financial planning and money coaching now. This is my, I just had my 20th anniversary in September, and people don't realize how powerful, the epiphanies we can have on our money journey to help us evolve and move forward. So could you share more about, the good, bad, and the ugly, and what happened on the other side of what you've developed in order to change your money consciousness?
Well, I will say this, and I'm going to say this to people, that was one of the most painful things that happened to me in my adult life, because I felt that it was my fault. I felt like, I'll say this, when I was growing up, we didn't have any money, so there was nothing to teach me about how to manage money or take care of money or any of that. So that's just innocence at that point. But when I was given the money, because my ex-husband ran all our finances, I worked and everything, but he ran all the finances, and so he took care of that. So that wasn't an area that I took care of. So I still kind of had an innocence. But once I was awarded the money, now it's your responsibility to be educated in it. And I call it was my ignorance, because I just thought, oh, I'm just going to let my financial advisor do it, trust him, let him do everything, and trusted everything I was signing, trusted everything, instead of being proactive, instead of learning, instead of taking that. So I want to address that and say, there's a difference between innocence and ignorance. And I kind of went through that and had to face the fact that I was ignorant in it. But as I evolved through it, I had an understanding of how to manage my money. I started educating myself. I started, of course, I got a new financial advisor with a whole different firm. And I went through that process. So, and as I went through my education in neurolinguistic programming and all these techniques, and as I said, I've done so many balances on myself, and a lot had to even do with my self-esteem, because money's connected to your self-esteem, money's connected to ego. It's connected to really so many different areas of our lives that I had to literally rebalance or look at. So when I tell somebody to look at every area of their life, I had to. And so I restructured it all. And it was painful until I started seeing changes. The minute I started seeing changes in my economic well-being and in my mental consciousness, my money consciousness, when I was like, oh, because things were starting to change. For me, that was a wonderful journey. And that's when I realized, oh, if I'm doing this for myself, why am I not doing this for other people? So I really started putting together the program that would assist others, and it did. So I first started with my Reiki clients who were coming to me for Reiki, and I'd say, you know what, I have all this, and I was having great success. And I found that I had one, I'll talk about one client that I had. I know you're asking me about myself, and I hope I answered it, but I can give people an idea of like how fast this can work. I had a client that came, said, I have great relationships. I have great, everything's going well, but I don't understand why my 3 companies, it was an entrepreneur. I don't understand why my 3 companies aren't taking off. Well, she had an abundance block that went all the way back to childhood because she was told that she couldn't achieve, financial success. She couldn't own a business. She was told that. She came from a very conservative family that thought women didn't do that. And so we went through the process of reprogramming. We found out where it first started. We removed that, and we put in a new belief system that she was successful in everything that she did for her businesses and her life. We included everything, ultimate abundance. We did about, I think, 5 or 7 balances. And I work with people so that it's their words, it resonates with them. And I didn't hear from her. And I thought, all my clients write me back as soon as they see the first change. So I wrote her and she goes, oh my gosh, I've had the most abundant month ever. All 3 of my businesses took off. And all it was taking that energy, that frequency, that belief system that she had and removed it. And that's how fast it can work. It can work in one. I had several people within less than a month write me back saying, this is awesome.
It's so powerful when we remove those blocks, how fast anything can change in our lives, money, non-money related items. It's just having those, I call it always, having that epiphany and having that realization that what's stopping us. And self-reflection doesn't always bring that to light because our brain doesn't know the difference between a truth and a lie. That's why it's important to have somebody like you that says, you sure you're thinking about that the right way? Let's have a conversation. Let's figure out exactly what's holding you back and look at what you did for that person. That's amazing. They're blessed to have found you, obviously, especially if they're 3 companies now or in a, she's in an abundant state of, and it's not just the abundance of money or if her company's being successful, it's her 6 inches between her ears is now, she's more happy. I guarantee she's got a spring in her step, right? She's probably a lot more happy in her life. So thank you for sharing about that. Again, you're right though. We have to know the difference between are we ignorant?
Yep.
If you're ignorant, then what are you going to do to get rid of that ignorance? Ignorance isn't a basis of defense anyway. It doesn't matter where you are in the world.
No.
You got to take ownership, take stock. This is what I've done. This is what I've had happen. Like I can't imagine, exactly what you went through. I understand the pain of that. I got into this industry because of being taken advantage of by somebody in this industry. So when, I was wondering when I was going to close my computer consulting firm down, or what was I going to do in regards to IT, and the universe is unique. I was having pain in my life financially and didn't really get what was going on. I didn't have a lot of support. All of a sudden, boom, somebody reached out and asked me if I think you should get into the financial services industry. You're good with people and you could use some help yourself. All right. Once you get some help, then you'll be able to take all the other skills you have along with that and go out and serve the planet and serve the world, right? As many, people as possible, and help them, live a life on purpose and not by accident, and not be camped and stuck on that hamster wheel. So kudos to you for being a servant of others. And, people listening, it's okay to be a servant of others and make money too. It's okay to take care of your own life as long as it's done in an ethical, moral, and, a kind way. There's nothing wrong with that. So if you have got that block of oh, I'm taking advantage of somebody, you're not. You're serving them. All you're doing is deciding to, no different than you trading your time for dollars and going to a job. You're trading your time, your dollars, to increase your 6 inches between your ears so that you can have abundance in the areas you're lacking. And usually if you're lacking in one area, it's affecting all your other areas anyway. So you need to get them all in tune. At least I believe that.
No, you do.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I believe that as well.
thank you. So one of the last things, Janet, is if you had to give our listeners one last closing message, what would you tell them in regards to giving a heck and never giving up?
Okay, giving a heck, never giving up. Well, I'll say this, and this is the best thing I can say. Success in every area of your life is real and obtainable, but the power is in your hands. So with that, never give up. Just know that you have the power, because you have the power to recognize it. You have the power to find the people that have the tools that can assist you to achieve anything you want to achieve. Everybody's out there in service to each other, and you can find who resonates with you, but you have to recognize that and understand that it is obtainable.
Oh, 100%. It's realization, recognizing, be the willing. And one thing I will add to that, because that is a great closing message, don't be afraid to interview the people that you want to help in your life, and recognize and realize your own body triggers, your own body language of how somebody makes you feel. Like if you've never been attuned to it, people listening or watching, I know my anxiety triggers. I know different things about my body that I've had to learn. And when they get triggered, that's my internal radar going, something's not right.
Yes.
Right. So don't be afraid to say to somebody, oh, okay, that's great. Thank you for sharing what you can possibly help me with. I'll get back to you. Don't be pushed into things, because if you have any of those, you have anything, any angst or any feelings that aren't feeling well, then if you walk away from that circumstance, that person, then you can actually think about it. Right? You can actually put some stock to the fact of why you were feeling like that. Maybe that feeling was from something that happened a few minutes before you spoke to them. But then you can dial into it. Don't just hire the first person you talk to, because I have hired people right off the bat that we just connected, we gelled right away. And I could feel it in my heart, mind, and soul that I was literally meant to be with them, and vice versa. But when I feel any angst, I literally disconnect now and walk away to think about it, because I've made some poor choices when I haven't.
I agree with that. I will say ditto on that one. I have to.
Yeah, so I appreciate your time, Janet. This has been an amazing conversation. Thanks so much for coming on. Listeners, people watching, my next question for Janet, pardon me, is how can people reach out to you so that they can, connect?
They can go to my website, which is www.janetelainschmidt.com. If they'll see a list of all my services and a description of a lot of the techniques that we're talking about, so that they can have an understanding, or they can just write directly to my assistant at janetelaneschmidt.com.
Sweet. I will make sure that all goes into the show notes. For those new listeners or people watching, you can find the show notes at www.giveaheck.com. Go into the podcast portal and you will see Janet's face. And below that, you'll see a breakdown of some of the things we've discussed in the show, as well as the links in order to be able to reach out to her. So thanks again, Janet. This has been an amazing conversation. I'm certain that it will change a lot of people's thought processes and hopefully enough where they reach out to you, or even if it's not you, they reach out to somebody to stop being camped in life. Like nobody deserves to live on the hamster wheel of life if they choose not to. And a lot of times there's people that want to change, just don't know where to go. And now we've both given them another shot, another place to go. So I appreciate your time. It's been a great conversation.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
You bet. So thanks so much again for being on Give a Heck, Janet. I appreciate your time and sharing some of your experiences so that others too can learn it is never too late to give a heck.
Thank you for taking time out of your day and listening to Give a Heck. If you find value, I'd appreciate you sharing with your friends and family so they too can learn how to live life on purpose, not by accident. So you do not miss the next episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, and please also post a review. I look forward to reading your comments. This has been Dwight Heck. If you want to check out other podcast episodes or today's show notes, please check out my website, giveaheck.com. And until next time, together let us all strive to give a heck.